Thank you for coming out tonight. My name is Taylor. I'm the nursery manager at the UC Davis Arboretum and Public Gardens. I want to thank the City of Davis for providing an opportunity for all of you to come out to this workshop and to learn a little bit more about landscaping, drought-tolerant plants, and how to put the right thing in the right place. And also for letting me do what I like to do, and that's talk about plants. So we are here to discuss several different things, and so we're just going to dive right in. One of the easiest ways to get it right is to start doing it right from the beginning, and this really comes down to picking the right plant and putting it in the right place. What is the right plant? What is the right place? Well, we'll get into all of those things as we go through this. Just a few little words up there for you to keep in your head. So this is more than just buying a full sun plant that is in the full sun plant section at the nursery that you go to. This is a little more complicated than that. You're going to have to know that a little bit more about the place that you're going to be putting this plant that you've selected, and we will definitely dig into that. It's easy to see when you put the wrong plant in the wrong place. This is one of those kind of no-brainers, but it usually takes years until you figure this out. Some of these things seem like a great idea, these small trees in this little spot next to a house. Maybe that they weren't supposed to get 25 feet tall. Maybe the salesman said it was going to be 15 feet tall. Or maybe that's what you found on the internet that said it was going to be a 10-foot tree, and this is what happened. I think something like this ivy hedge that really just kind of grows all the way out into the sidewalk is a pretty common thing that you're going to see, is that just the maintenance portion of the plant afterwards is sometimes not taken into account. We grow plants. All of us, wholesalers, retailers, all of these nurseries that you buy plants from, when we grow them, when we buy labels from these, also these growers that produce these plants, we all buy the same tag. They all say the same thing, whether we're in Sacramento, California, whether we're in San Diego, California, or whether we're in San Francisco. 3 vastly different climate zones, and they all have the same tag. So where did they produce the tag for? What does it say? Does it say full sun on the tag? Does it say full sun to part shade on the tag? What does that mean? I mean, how does that relate to what you've got and to the spot that you've got? Where are you going to plant this plant anyways? What is your right place? So there are a few things, kind of grain of salt things that you want to take into account when you're looking at this tag, when you're buying this plant, is if it says kind of full sun to part shade, you can probably expect that to be able to handle mostly sun all of the day, and also to be able to do well in part shade. This isn't always necessarily true, because this isn't a plant that I would plant in the full sun here in the Sacramento Valley. One thing that I hear quite a lot, I answer a lot of questions about plants from customers, and the biggest thing is that, well, I have this X, call it an azalea, that's living in the full sun, that's been in the full sun for a long time. And that may be true, because I would tell you normally to plant an azalea in the shade. It doesn't mean that it can't live in the sun, but you'll probably see a decreased flower production. You'll see that you have to water this plant a lot more, and you'll see that it probably doesn't look as green and as healthy as an azalea if it was planted in part shade, where it had a half day of protection from the sun. So can it live there? Yes. Is it going to look its best? Not necessarily. Seasonal extremes. What I think of seasonal extremes is that I think a lot of us don't realize that the sun actually moves, and so you get this variance of anywhere from 6 to 10 feet of shade and shadow that's cast by houses, by trees, other structures that might be in the area that you don't necessarily realize. If you're planting these plants in April in what you think is the shade, and then you lose the shade as the sun kind of works its way up to the hottest part of the year in June, July, and all of a sudden this plant is exposed to afternoon full sun, and that can be, I mean, terribly detrimental to the plant. So knowing your area, knowing what your place is, being able to define that is crucial to where you're going to put the plant and what plant you're going to buy there. So we say it, we preach it, right? What does it mean? What does right plant, right place mean? Picture of a European birch that is planted and was probably just fine for a long time. There are a lot of plants that don't necessarily or can't necessarily handle our climate extremes, and this is, if we can put water on it 3 times a week, then some plants are just fine and they'll survive and they'll do well in the hottest areas and in the coldest areas without issue. But the problem is that what we're facing now is being short of water and having to really reduce on our water usage. Is that these trees and shrubs that needed the extra irrigation throughout the year are not responding very well, and we're losing a lot of these plants that are really very thirsty. European birch is definitely one of them. I mean, even California natives like redwoods, you know, they're going to take a lot more water than a California oak will. So another thing that kind of comes into play with right plant, right place is, what did you buy? You got a nice plant that says that this can be kept as a 5-foot shrub. Okay, this plant, if left unchecked, will get 25 feet tall. So what did you sign up for? I mean, what is the relationship that you just got into, whether you knew it or not? So this is going to be, you know, pruning on the sides and pruning on the front and pruning on the top for the rest of the plant's life, until you get sick of doing it and take it out and put something else in that only grows to 5 feet. This is a big part of picking the right plant, is that if you want a 5-foot tall plant, buy one that only gets 5 feet tall. When we talk about lower maintenance and less maintenance, with selecting appropriate plants, regionally appropriate plants, the right plant for the right place, keep these things in mind, because we want you to not have to try as hard, not have to water as much, and not have to do as much, have as much impact in your landscape as possible. And if you can avoid going out there with head shears every 6 weeks or so to prune this guy down, you're going to be happier with your yard. You're going to spend more time enjoying your yard and less time having to work at your yard. This is a pretty common picture. This is something that I saw a lot going through UC Davis. Is this, for some reason, we just assumed that these trees were going to be fine underneath these power lines. Power lines, telephone lines, all of these wires, cable wires, anything like that that you have in your yard is going to come into play. And I think we look down a lot when we go to figure out what our planting plan is, but I think rarely we look up to actually see what is overhead. So if you want to put a 50-foot tree, I mean, it's this tall when you buy it, and it's this wide when you buy it. But this thing is going to be 50 feet wide, and it's going to be 50 feet tall. If you were to kind of walk around and measure that out, is that something that your space can handle? Can it handle a tree of that size? Is there a roof right there? Do you need the tree that close to the house? Are the tree and the house going to be good relationship partners later on down the line? So definitely look where you're planting. So some of just the quick things that you'll want to think about before you really get into picking the right plant for the right place we're going to go through each one of these. So strap yourselves in, and we'll get down to business. I always think that having some sort of a plan to begin with, knowing what you're doing and where you're going, is a crucial part of making your landscape what you want it to see. Because if you don't know and you just begin working in your yard, it's hard to know what to do next. It's hard to know what needs to be done. It's even hard to know what you have. So come up with a plan. What do you want? What do you have already? And what are you going to need as you go along through this? So Just a kind of a quick little horrible iPhone picture of my front yard and what I moved into when I took it over. And this is weedy plants and grassy plants and spreading things, and I'm sure that the homeowner loved how each one of them looked, but didn't maybe necessarily know that it was going to take over the whole front portion of the yard. So this is what I have. What you have is going to be totally different, or it might be the same, and we can collaborate. But knowing what you are walking into, knowing what you're walking on. So this is kind of a crucial thing. I don't think that your particular soil type, whether it's yellow class 1 or pescadero soils or Sacramento clay, whatever your particular soil type is, on a soil map, it's not going to be that when you start digging in it, because they've scraped it away. They've changed the soil complex. They flattened it out. You want it flattened out. Your house has got to stand there. So where this soil triangle here and figuring out what you have versus sandy clay and sandy loam and loamy soils, that could be important because you'll know how your soil could drain or the potential of that soil, but you don't necessarily know what you're dealing with underneath your feet. The best way to do this is to start digging. How are plants performing? Watching them in the wintertime. Is there standing water somewhere? Is there natural slopes? Is there natural degradations of soil from the old construction? Is there anything that you need to think about? And most of these can be handled kind of by digging in. We could spend 2 hours talking just about soil, and we have. So we'll save that for another time. It's a good idea to know what you're working in. I've talked a little bit about this so far, but knowing how the sun influences your plants is a big portion of how well they're going to succeed down the road. Planting a shade plant right here, and I don't think most of us would do it because we're not counting on any shade to actually actually get in here. But to think that everything back here is full sun is also not the way to go, because if you plant a sun-loving lavender or anything back here in these corners where it doesn't get that full sun, it's just not going to perform very well. So this is kind of a good idea to walk through. This time of year in June, July, it's a really good time to know what the worst part of the year, worst sun is going to be for your yard. So if you spend a day just kind of tracking, knowing that in the morning this area is all shade, and in the afternoon when it's the hottest, that 4 o'clock sun, what is that hitting? Is that on your daphnes? Is that burning your azaleas? Is that getting your ferns? Could that be kind of what the cause is, because you go out there in the morning and the whole area is shaded? So know what you're dealing with and know what your exposure is in regards to sun. So there's a lot of different types of irrigation. This one's not as used as much anymore. But you'll see that, you've probably heard, everybody has a different idea of what their irrigation system is supposed to be, and every time a new type of system comes out, we rush to change it out to the new and better thing, the soaker hose, the MP rotators, the drip systems, and versus the same pop-up sprinklers that we've all got probably when everything was first installed. I won't say that one is the way to go. I think that actually a combination of systems is probably going to be best for you, and it's going to be different for you depending on what sort of plants you have and how all of those plants fit into the way that you want to use. Don't run out and change to drip system if your pop-up sprayers can cover the area that you're looking for and can do the job that you want them to do, and that's keeping your plants wet and watering them thoroughly and deeply and getting them established. There are definitely better ways to manage your water usage, as far as just like what it says, watering in the evening, making sure you're not watering when it's really windy, not watering when it's really rainy. So there's a lot of things that we can do to change the way that we water. If you're going to keep your lawn, which you can, you just have to be really smart about the way that you water it, and you have to be okay with it not being emerald green all the time. It's going to have a little bit of brown in it. Irrigation's a really complex topic because there's a lot of factors that go into this. There's a lot of different options, and there's a lot of different alternatives for maybe what you do have. So have you guys had the irrigation talk so far? Okay, did everybody learn something from that? Okay, right on. Yeah, save questions for those if you've got them. I like this because I don't know what that is. I have no idea what these 6 different things that have kind of grown together are. All I want to say about that is that we've got these big shade things out there that we want to keep alive, and that's what everybody's preaching. It's like, yes, kill your lawn, but keep your trees. Just keep your trees. This is going to be important in time when this actually stops, this whole drought thing, and we want a tree there still. It's also important because it's wherever it's shading, it's not evaporating or evapotranspirating from your yard nearly as quick as it would if you had full sun. So that's really all that's about. So what you have is it's kind of important, because the ones that you have, the plants that you have, where they're at, they're going to take less water than the ones that you put in right now. And they're going to take less water until this plant is established. This brand new plant that you just put in is going to take more water than the Nandina that's still there, that's been there for 15 years, that you probably don't even have to water anyways. Look at what you've got. Know that if they're crowded and growing in together, maybe you don't need both of them there taking up the same space. Maybe one of them will do better without that. The way you can pick it is that you usually look at the health of the plant. Like, how does it bloom? Does it get bugs? A stressed plant is going to get funguses, diseases, insects more readily than it would if it was in the right spot and not crowded by other plants. So if you jam a bunch of things together, you create this great environment for fungal spores and things like that to just jump from plant to plant, for mold to kind of really do its damage on plants. So when I say keep the healthy ones, keep the ones that actually look good and that do what they're supposed to do. If your azaleas well, you guys can't have azaleas here, never mind. We'll change that. Your berberis, your mahonias, your Oregon grapes. If that's in the shade and it's blooming really well and it looks really good, why take it out, right? It's doing what it's supposed to be doing. So when you decide to get rid of these full sun plants that have languished in the shade for a long time, that are really stretched out, that their leaves are this far apart from each other because it's reaching out for the sun, maybe those are the ones that you say goodbye to. And I've got plenty of shade plants, and we can talk about that. Watering existing plants while you're watering newly planted ones. If you're planting in the fall, it makes it really easy because you're watering everything a little bit less anyways. If you're planting them right now, this is where all of your shower water is going, because you're out there watering this thing at least 3 times a week. When you buy these plants, when you actually purchase these plants and you want to plant them among your existing landscape, there's a couple things you need to know. How often I'm watering them, and if you're planting them in the right spot. If I'm watering this plant in this 1 gallon container every other day, you're going to want to keep it on that schedule. As you go further into the life of the plant in your yard, you can actually decrease the number of days that you water and increase the amount of time that you water them. I mean, that makes sense, right? You can, over time, 3-4 weeks in the ground, you can start kind of slowly backing off on this and adjust its schedule. If you're watering it 3 times a week or 4 times a week at 10 minutes at a time, and you eventually get it down to twice a week at 20 minutes at a time, it's the same amount of water. You're just developing those root systems, pushing those root systems down, getting the plant a little bit more drought tolerant, getting it a little bit more established. Everybody wants to know how long it takes to establish a plant. I'll talk about that. At least 3 to 5 years. There are a few plants that I would say, yeah, the deer grass is going to be established in 1 season. Okay, that's kind of my best case scenario. If everything worked like a deer grass, this would all be easy and I'd probably be out of a job. It's not. Every plant is going to need some sort of a watering. Almost every plant. I'm going to say every plant, and then I'm going to have to second guess myself, because as soon as I said that, I thought of 3 that don't necessarily need water once they're, after the first year. Generally speaking, when you've got a brand new plant, it's going to take at least 3 years before that plant is what we would call drought tolerant, and that means that it can handle the environmental conditions of the place that it's native to. So if it's Western Australia, you know that it can probably handle our climate. You know, if it's central Brazil, it's probably going to need a little bit more water than what we would normally get it, and it's going to take it a little bit longer to become established. So I love this picture because I hear people ask, why don't I sell I don't really sell like 5-gallon containers or 15-gallon containers of anything. So people are always asking me, well, what if I just bought a bigger size of this plant? Could I water it less? No, but it's a great question. Because just because you've got a deeper root system doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to take less water. What it's going to mean is that you're going to have to get water further down in here to actually keep the root ball of this plant wet. I use the best draining soil media that I can get inside my pot, which means that I can water them more frequently in the nursery containers, in the nursery setting, and they can dry out, and then there's no problems with root rots or anything like that, which is great until you actually take this plant home that I've put in really nice draining soil in and put it in your yard, which has this really heavy, compacted, maybe clay soil substrate around this. And so the plant is going to, you know, all the water that you put on this brand new plant is going to go right out into that clay until the clay is saturated to the point that it's not going anywhere. Because the water wants to move. It wants to move from a high pressure to a low pressure. It wants to move from this really big place to a really small place. And when you think about your soil that's in this plant, that's in this pot, it's a really big particle. So it's going to want to go into the smaller particles of your soil. Again, this is, talking about soil is another 2-hour talk, so I'm not going to try to get in that too much. But just because you buy a bigger size doesn't mean that you can water it less. You're just going to have to water that deeper. This is where I'm stuck right now, is what do I want? I don't know. I have all summer to figure it out, so I'm not really worried about the what I want part of it. I know mine isn't barren with these, you know, this gravel that's out there, and that's all you have. Maybe some yard art. That's not what my dream landscape looks like. It is going to look. I mean, there's going to be blooms. I love flowers that bloom. I want to see them. I want them to do what they're supposed to do. But is that what yours looks like? Maybe not. There's a lot of maintenance that comes along with a lot of plants that bloom throughout the year. I mean, I know that if I get into a relationship with my yard that I'm going to be out there, and that's something that I want. So maybe you just take everything out except for the trees that are there, and you just mulch the whole damn thing, and you're done, right? I mean, except for the whole watering the trees thing. So you have to decide what your landscape looks like. And I know this is kind of where I'm always stuck. So for years I got pushback when I first started trying to get people to buy California native plants. You'll look through this and you'll see, wow, this is really all like California native stuff. So I've had these for a while now. I just kind of keep reusing them with every one of these talks that I go to. And maybe someday I'll incorporate Australian natives and Mediterranean plants into here. But for now, it's all California natives. So people would always tell me, I don't want there's like one season that they look good and then they're done. They don't hardly bloom. They kind of look bad. These are the stereotypical questions and the comments that I'd get that they heard from somebody somewhere, and it was kind of just repeated down the line. So that's why I did this, is because I wanted to show people that you can buy a lot of different plants, and you can buy, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can buy 5 plants and have blooms year round in your yard. So it's possible. When you're looking at that label, this is going to be another thing. Bloom time on a tag. Salvia gregia, your regular reds and purples and orange salvias that you see all over the place, those actually can bloom almost year round in a different climate than ours. They don't do that here. They don't bloom in the winter, and they don't bloom as well in the summer. Spring, there's a great show. Fall, there's a great show. But the tag on there is going to say it blooms spring, summer, and fall. So when you read something, maybe it's not exactly what it's going to do here. So take it all with a grain of salt again when you read that label. I know that we have spring sales because people want plants, and I push back against spring sales because I go, oh, it's not the right time. It's not the best time of the year to plant. Is it okay to plant? It's just fine to plant in the spring. Everything's blooming. We feel like gardening. It hasn't been, 111 degrees for 3 months straight as it does in the fall. And it's a lot easier to go out there in the springtime and actually dig in your garden and plant things in the springtime.
So does this take into account our area?
Yes. Yes, this is very much our area. So the colors, everybody asks, are the colors of the flowers, except for the green, which isn't actually a flower color. That's the white, but the white wouldn't show up on here really well. So yeah, that's woohoo. Keep that. That comes in actually pretty handy. So not that all those plants are available all the time, but I do try to grow almost all of them for my sales.
What did you just say, that all of these would be available in the fall?
Not all of those are always available all the time. So that's one of the good things about having sales at different times of the year, is that I can have these plants that took 2 years to actually get to this size available. And it might take me a year to get those back in stock. But we always do post our availability list online on the Arboretum website before the sale. If I'm really on the ball, it's 2 weeks ahead. If it's usual, it's like 3 days before. And that's pretty typical. So I think everybody wants, not necessarily the punk rock pipevine swallowtail caterpillar in their yard, but I think one of the reasons that we garden is that we feel, we know about this connection that we have with us and our landscape and what it does, and these birds and these bees and all of these things that kind of interact together. And so we plant things to attract them. And we have to be okay with the fact that that guy is going to eat the heck out of our California pipevine. That's what they're supposed to do. So I'm in a big debate with one of my employees about maybe there's enzymes that are released by this plant when it's eaten by the swallowtail caterpillar that make it grow better, because it's the only thing that this particular caterpillar will eat is this plant. I'm going to ramble about this, but I can't help it. There are these associations that these insects, that these bugs, that these birds have with the plants that they've grown up with. I mean, 5,000 years back when there wasn't any of us, a lot of us humans here messing with invasive plants and bringing all of these sort of things in. It was just plants, and it was their bugs, and it was their birds, and they were learning how to get along with each other. And they were using what they needed out of these plants, and they were getting them all the time. If we plant rose from China that gets aphids all the time and gets diseases all the time and things of this nature, it gets these aphids because there are no beneficial associations. This plant that we planted, all of the beneficials are in China. If we were planting this rose in China, it wouldn't get all of these aphids because it grew up there. And so there are probably the beneficial insects that take care of the aphids that live in China. If you're planting California natives, you'll actually get to see this. So you plant something like a California buckwheat or a coyote brush. You can go out there when it's in bloom and you can see things that you've never, ever seen before. You can take a picture of this plant when it's in full bloom and get 6 different species of insects in one single frame because they're used to using that plant. They're the bugs that are here. So I'm off my soapbox. But it's true, if you do plant it, they will come. They will come. You will get all the bugs and the birds that you want, I promise. Most of us want drought tolerant plants. There's probably nobody that's thinking that they're gonna go cold hardy tropical during this season that we're having of drought. So when you go into the nurseries, now finally, after years of me trying to, I was in the wholesale end, I've been in the retail end of nursery, and now I'm kind of in this weird wholesale-y retail thing at the Arboretum nursery. But for years was trying to get people to grow more California natives, to offer more California natives. And it was talking to these, as a wholesaler, talking to these retail nurseries saying, why won't you buy these plants? And it's really simple. I mean, nobody wanted them. Nobody was asking for them. For years, nobody wanted them. There was a couple people. There was like 10% of these people that were kind of diehards that were buying these California native plants or drought tolerant plants. They're not doing these cold hardy tropical things as big as they were anymore. Now you go into any nursery and you can find their drought tolerant section where you used to have to dig for this before. So they're out there. There are several climates around the world that have plants that are specifically suited to grow here and do very well here. Places that we might not necessarily think, some that we are kind of obvious to us. So plant drought tolerant plants. So I'm going to say that no more tonight. Have a plan. Have an idea of what you're going to do before you do it. You guys know what Arboretum All-Stars are? That's pretty cool. That's 100 plants that are really good for around here. I will probably have 15,000 plants available in October for you guys to kind of rummage through. And there's probably 300 or 400 different species of plants that you can pick from. So just because we picked 100 plants doesn't mean that there's not 500 more plants that are also amazing plants. And so don't be afraid to dig in and experiment with some of these plants or to ask questions about them. How do you pick the right ones? I will get into kind of some different ways, some different websites and some things you can look at. Mulch for sure. If you do one thing right, put mulch down in your yard. That's going to keep the water where you put it. We'll talk a little bit about that later. Maintenance, when you're planting drought tolerant plants and California native plants, the first slide I had up there was like, if you plant these, it's going to be easier to take care of and you're going to spend less time working on this 5-foot photinia hedge that you're trimming all the time, and you're actually going to have time to enjoy the flowers that are blooming year-round in your garden. So that's what you need, I think, in my opinion, what you need to do your lawn. This is our website, or at least it was an old picture of our website homepage from years ago that I found in off our server, and it was easy to use. So this is arboretum.ucdavis.edu. Information about plant sales, information about our gardens, information about specific plants, planting plans, and things like that. You can get to a place where you can find a plant that you're looking for. There's this little line up there that says they use the All-Star database, and if you do click on that, it's going to take you to this search place, and you can search what you want, you know, a tree, a shrub, a thing like that, and it's going to give you one of our Arboretum All-Stars, which again are pretty amazing plants. And I'll probably have maybe 85 of the 100 of them this fall, so it's pretty good. It's not bad. There's some that I just can't grow right now. This was all. Has anybody heard of Lukeholes? Dawn has. There's a couple of people that are kind of raising their hand. So this is a really cool project that I got to work on. This is over 4,000 plants that have been rated by people from the area that they live in. So Central Valley, Central Coast, Northern California, high desert, all of these sort of things. I'm going to see if we can actually get into there. What do you think? Oh, no. Oh. Okay, well, if you search Lukeholes for, because this is the brand new edition that just came out 2 years ago, it is an entire list of plants, and what we did is we rated their water needs. Not just how much can it survive on, but what it's going to look best at. So you can find the salvia that your heart's been desiring, and you can probably find it on this list, and you can say, here in the Central Valley, all of these people that have been planting plants for a long time call it a very low water plant. And that means that I only have to water it once a month after it's established for the rest of its life. Dig around in there, see what you think. That's a cool website. It'll help you find plants that you probably didn't know about before, and it'll also help you to do something that we'll talk about, which is hydrozoning plants, and that's just grouping plants together, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Once you have your list, and you go to the nursery to actually pick some of these out, whether it's my nursery or whether it's one of our great local nurseries that we have here in and around Davis, don't just believe me that the plants that I've grown are perfect plants and that everything is right or how it should be. And when you take them home, they're not necessarily how they should be. Take the plant out of the pot. It's not going to look weird. If you actually take the plant out of the pot, I'm going to applaud. And I'm going to say, way to go. Don't just trust me because we're UC Davis and we sell plants. Don't just trust your local nursery because you've been shopping there for years. We all buy plants in from other places. And you don't know necessarily about the reputation of those or how well they've taken care of them or how long that they've even been in a pot. And that's probably the biggest singular thing that causes problems with plants that you pick once you plant them in the ground, is how long they've lived in that pot. I will not keep a plant over 1 year. I won't do it. I'd rather throw them away than sell them to you completely rooted in. That's just the way it is. That's not always the case. There was really like 4 really hard years, 8, 9, 10, and 2011, that you had to basically sell everything that you possibly had because we couldn't spend any money because we were hurting really bad. So there might be a little bit of a hangover in the industry because of this, the recession that we all went through. I'm really picky about what I'll sell. It may not look perfect on the top, but it's going to be just fine on the bottom.